In the 12th century, a mysterious collection of medical texts began circulating through Europe. Written, some say, by a woman. They would shape how doctors treated women for the next 500 years. But here's the twist. At the exact same time, on the other side of the world, women were surviving childbirth surgeries that European medicine wouldn't master for centuries. So how does that happen? And what does it tell us about how history really treated women? That's exactly what we're unpacking today. And trust me, you won't see the ending.
In the year 1300, a pregnant woman viewed the onset of labor with specific, cold terror. She knew the birth of her child was the most likely thing to kill her, and as the pain began, she fought to lock one person out of the room, the doctor. Male physicians of this era possessed only theoretical book learning. They were strictly barred from the female-only business of childbirth. If a man with medical tools actually crossed the threshold of the birthing room, it indicated that natural delivery had already failed and the mother was likely dying. Bringing life into the world was the leading cause of mortality for medieval women. To survive this crisis, mothers relied on a fiercely guarded network of midwives who fought death using ancestral knowledge and empirical lore. Survival statistics were so grim that pregnant women frequently spent their final weeks writing their wills, making arrangements for their children's care, and saying goodbyes before the first contraction even started. When labor commenced, the midwife immediately sealed the environment. Believing that cold drafts and fresh air would invite evil spirits or cause sickness, she ordered the doors barred and the windows tightly shuttered. The room quickly became stifling. Women labored for hours, sometimes days, in sweltering darkness. The heavy air filled with the smell of sweat, blood, amniotic fluid, and the bitter, thick scent of dried herbs hanging from the wooden rafters. While these precautions were meant to protect the mother from spiritual harm, they unintentionally created a perfect, unventilated incubator for lethal bacterial infections. To understand the midwife's interventions, we have to look at the flawed medical framework guiding her hands. Many of her actions centered on a concept known as the wandering womb. This animation illustrates the prevalent theory. A woman's uterus was an independent entity. If distressed, it migrated upward, compressing the lungs. To treat this, midwives held foul-smelling pitch beneath the nose to repel it, downward, placing sweet aromatics near the pelvis to coax it back. But compare that theoretical guesswork to this illustration from a medieval manuscript. These 4 circular drawings show the midwife's practical understanding of fetal presentation: breech, inverted, and transverse positions that could easily trap the baby inside the birth canal. The midwife was attempting to manually solve lethal anatomical blockages using a medical playbook that misunderstood how the human body worked. When labor stalled, she deployed an arsenal of physical interventions. First, she used gravity. The exhausted mother would be propped on a birthing stool, a chair with a hole cut into the seat, squatting and pushing for stretches that could easily exceed 48 hours. If the baby remained stuck, the midwife turned to botanical tools. A common method was the application of thick mugwort smoke, intended to relax the pelvic tissue and accelerate the delivery. This manuscript sketch reveals the actual technology used to administer those herbs. Notice the specialized fumigation pots and the long insertion tube designed to funnel the smoke directly into the reproductive system. When physical strength and herbal remedies failed, the room transitioned to spiritual armor. In this grid, you can see protective circular diagrams and written charms, like the Seder Arepo square. Midwives placed these amulets on the mother's abdomen, hoping to force a breakthrough. The midwives' toolkit combined physical laws, centuries of botanical observation, and desperate spiritual defense to exert control over a deeply uncontrollable biological process. Sometimes labor crossed the multi-day mark. The baby is lodged against bone, the mother's strength is completely failing. This exhaustion was compounded by an invisible killer, childbed fever. With no concept of hygiene, the midwife introduced lethal bacteria directly into the mother's bloodstream via unwashed hands and contaminated instruments. Then came the trauma of unstoppable hemorrhaging. Medieval medicine had absolutely no cure and no blood transfusions for this complication. Mothers simply bled out while the room watched and prayed. If the mother was actively dying and the infant remained trapped, The midwife faced a horrifying surgical decision. To save the woman's life, she had to destroy the stuck fetus. These are the crude, terrifying instruments required to execute a craniotomy or dismemberment in utero. The midwife would reach inside with these sharp metal hooks to collapse the infant's skull and extract it piece by piece. Stacked on top of this medical nightmare was immense religious pressure. Church doctrine mandated that unbaptized babies could not enter heaven, forcing the midwife to perform emergency baptisms inside the womb by pouring holy water over the dying infant. When a natural delivery failed, the secluded birthing room instantly transformed into a crude surgical theater, operating without anesthesia, antibiotics, or a scientific safety net. With nearly 1 in 4 women dying eventually from childbirth, surviving multiple pregnancies was an incredible statistical anomaly. Yet, eventually, the frantic agony does end. A sharp cry cuts through the heavy air. The bleeding is packed and stopped. The mother survives. The psychological toll on the attending women was immense. Midwives carried the burden of the deaths they couldn't prevent and were frequently scapegoated by grieving families or even accused of witchcraft when outcomes turned fatal. And for the mother, enduring the delivery was only the first battle. She now faced months of agonizing recovery from severe tissue tearing, fistulas, and physical damage that, without modern surgery, would leave permanent pain. To manage this healing process, society utilized the lying-in period. This was a mandated recovery phase where the new mother remained strictly confined to a darkened bedchamber for weeks. In this Renaissance painting, see the exhausted mother confined to the red bed on the right, resting while elegantly dressed guests arrive. During confinement, she received the caudle, a warm mixture of spiced wine and gruel to rebuild severely depleted physical strength. The lying-in concluded with the churching ceremony. This was a formal religious ritual of purification, marking the exact moment the woman finally left her home to be reintegrated into the community. Medieval childbirth reveals the fierce solidarity of women who, locked away from formal medicine, relied on shared observation and sheer endurance to bring life into the darkest of ages.
History has always been written by those in power. But the women in this story? They were the ones holding life itself